In this episode, we focus on a deceptively simple idea that separates secure systems from systems that only look secure on paper. You cannot manage what you cannot see, and you cannot defend what you do not understand. Information management and measurement are the disciplines that turn security from assumptions into observable reality by organizing what you know, collecting signals about what is happening, and using those signals to make better decisions over time. Beginners often think security measurement means counting incidents or tracking vulnerability numbers, but mature security engineering uses measurement to answer deeper questions, such as whether controls are operating as intended, whether risk is increasing or decreasing, and whether the system is drifting away from its security requirements. Information management is what makes measurement possible because it ensures the right data exists, is trustworthy, and can be interpreted consistently rather than being scattered across teams and tools. When information management is weak, teams drown in noise and still miss important problems, and decisions become guesses made under pressure. When it is strong, the system develops a security truth-telling capability, meaning it can reveal problems early and support accountability with evidence. The goal here is to help you understand how to run these processes in a way that supports security engineering outcomes across design, delivery, and operations. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at Cyber.Author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A practical starting point is to define information management in plain language as the disciplined handling of security-relevant information so it remains accurate, accessible, and meaningful across the system lifecycle. Security-relevant information includes things like inventories of assets and components, records of configurations and baselines, access and privilege assignments, change histories, incident records, and evidence that security requirements were verified. It also includes the operational data that reveals current behavior, such as logs, alerts, and measurements of performance and availability that affect security objectives. Beginners sometimes imagine that information management is a storage problem, like having a place to put files, but in security engineering it is more about organizing meaning and ensuring data can be trusted. If you do not know what assets exist, you cannot defend them, and if you do not know what configuration is deployed, you cannot claim controls are effective. Information management also includes governance around who owns information, who updates it, and how it is validated, because stale or incorrect information creates false confidence. When exam scenarios describe uncertainty, contradictory reports, or inability to reconstruct events, they are often pointing toward failures in information management rather than purely technical failures. Measurement is the next concept to clarify, and it helps to think of it as turning questions into numbers or observable signals. A security measurement should exist to answer a specific question, like whether access reviews are happening on time, whether unauthorized changes are being detected quickly, or whether the system's logging covers critical actions. Measurements matter because they provide feedback loops, and feedback loops are what make complex systems controllable. Without feedback, you cannot tell whether a control is effective or whether risk is rising, and you tend to react only after incidents become visible. Beginners sometimes measure what is easy to count rather than what is meaningful, such as counting total alerts without asking whether alerts represent real risk. A meaningful measurement is tied to a security requirement or a risk decision, because those define what success looks like and what failure would mean. Measurement also needs context, because a number alone can mislead if you do not understand what changed in the system or in the environment. On the exam, answers that choose measurements tied to requirements and risk are often stronger than answers that propose vague reporting without clear purpose. To make measurement useful, you have to manage the quality of the information being measured, because poor data produces poor decisions. Information quality in security has several dimensions, including accuracy, timeliness, completeness, and integrity. Accuracy means the data reflects reality, such as whether an asset inventory includes all real devices and services. Timeliness means the data is current enough to support decisions, because last month's state may not match today's. Completeness means the data covers the scope that matters, like weather logs capture the events needed to reconstruct sensitive actions. Integrity means the data has not been altered in ways that undermine trust, which is important for audit records and incident investigations. Beginners often assume data is neutral and reliable, but security engineering treats information itself as an asset that must be protected and validated. If you measure access control effectiveness using incomplete logs, you may believe the system is safe when it is not. Running information management processes means building habits that preserve data quality so measurements are meaningful and trustworthy. A core part of information management is inventory, because inventory defines the system you are actually securing. Inventories can include hardware assets, software components, virtual resources, cloud services, data stores, and integrations with external partners. Inventory matters because it defines scope for controls, monitoring, patching, and assurance evidence, and missing inventory creates blind spots. A common beginner misunderstanding is that inventory is static, but modern environments change rapidly, and inventory must evolve with them or it becomes misleading. Inventory also includes relationships, such as which components depend on which services and where data flows, because relationships reveal trust boundaries and risk paths. When inventories are incomplete, security teams often focus on what they know and miss what they do not, and attackers often target what defenders forgot. Exam scenarios that involve unknown assets, surprise exposures, or unmanaged components often point to inventory failures, and the most defensible response includes improving information management to restore visibility. Inventory is not glamorous, but it is foundational because everything else depends on knowing what exists. Another major information management domain is identity and access information, because access decisions are among the most security-critical and most frequently changed parts of a system. Information management here includes maintaining clear records of who has access, what privileges exist, how privileges are granted, and when privileges are reviewed or removed. It also includes tracking privileged actions and changes that could affect security posture, because privileged misuse is high impact. Beginners sometimes assume identity management is a separate specialty, but even at a high level, security engineering depends on knowing who can do what and being able to prove that access is appropriate. Measurement processes can reveal whether least privilege is being maintained, such as detecting growth in privileged accounts or stale access for users who no longer need it. They can also reveal whether access governance is effective, such as whether reviews happen on schedule and whether exceptions are tracked and closed. When identity information is poorly managed, organizations often discover access problems only after an incident, which is too late. Exam questions about excessive privileges, unclear accountability, or repeated unauthorized changes often have answers that focus on improving access information and measurement. Configuration and change information is another area where information management and measurement reveal security reality, because change is where security posture often shifts quietly. Managing configuration information means maintaining baselines, tracking approved changes, and being able to compare current state to intended state to detect drift. Measuring change-related behaviors can reveal whether the system is being operated responsibly, such as whether emergency changes are frequent, whether changes are made outside approvals, or whether certain components drift more often than others. Beginners may think this is an operations detail, but security assurance depends on stable, traceable configurations, because evidence collected for one configuration does not prove security for another. A measurement process that reveals frequent unapproved changes or repeated drift is a sign that security requirements are not being sustained, even if the design was strong. Conversely, measurement that shows changes are controlled and that drift is detected quickly supports a stronger assurance story. Exam scenarios that include inconsistent environments, inability to reproduce issues, or repeated reintroduction of old problems often point toward weak change information management. Improving configuration information and the measurements built on it is often a root cause fix, not a superficial one. Logging and event information is often the most visible form of security information, but it is also one of the easiest to mishandle because volume can be high and meaning can be unclear. Good information management for logs means deciding what events matter for security, ensuring events include enough context to be useful, and protecting logs so they can be trusted during investigations. Measurement here is not just counting alerts. It is measuring whether logging is complete for critical actions, whether detection is timely, and whether incident investigations can reconstruct what happened. Beginners often assume that more logs are always better, but more logs can create noise that hides real signals, especially if there is no strategy for filtering and correlation. It is more useful to ensure that the right events are captured reliably than to capture everything without understanding. Measurement can also reveal gaps, such as whether key events are missing or whether logs arrive too late to support timely response. A system that cannot tell its own story is hard to defend because every incident becomes a guessing exercise. Exam scenarios about unclear incident timelines, missing evidence, or inability to attribute actions often point toward logging information management and measurement failures. Measurement processes also need to include outcome-focused indicators, because security engineering is ultimately about outcomes, not activity. Activity metrics might count how many scans were performed or how many tickets were closed, but outcome metrics ask whether risk is actually reduced, whether controls are effective, and whether assurance is stronger. For example, rather than measuring how many vulnerabilities exist, an outcome-oriented approach might measure how quickly high-risk exposures are reduced or how often vulnerabilities reappear due to regression. Rather than measuring how many alerts occur, an outcome approach might measure how quickly meaningful incidents are detected and contained, or how often alerts are false positives that waste attention. Beginners often confuse activity with progress because activity is easy to see, but progress is about whether the system is safer and more predictable. A strong measurement program uses a balanced set of indicators that show both effort and effect, so leaders can adjust strategy intelligently. This matters for governance because authorities need evidence to make risk decisions and to allocate resources effectively. Exam answers that focus on meaningful indicators tied to security objectives tend to be stronger than answers that propose reporting without clear impact. A critical part of running measurement processes is establishing feedback loops that connect measurement to decisions, because measurement without action is just reporting. A feedback loop means you measure, you interpret, you decide, and you adjust. Then you measure again to confirm whether the adjustment worked. In security engineering, feedback loops can improve requirements, refine controls, strengthen monitoring, and reduce operational chaos. For example, if measurements show that access reviews are consistently late, the organization may need to adjust process ownership, improve automation, or refine role definitions. If measurements show frequent configuration drift in a specific area, the organization may need to strengthen baselines, reduce manual changes, or improve change control discipline. Beginners sometimes assume that measurement is something you do for compliance, but compliance is only one reason. The deeper reason is control, because feedback loops allow you to steer the system towards safer behavior over time. Feedback loops also reduce blame because they turn problems into observable patterns that can be addressed systematically. Exam scenarios that involve repeated failures and no improvement often indicate missing feedback loops, and the best response includes creating measurement-driven improvement cycles. Another important consideration is measurement integrity, because security measurements can be gamed unintentionally or intentionally if incentives are misaligned. If teams are rewarded for reducing reported incidents, they may underreport. If teams are rewarded for closing tickets quickly, they may close them without addressing root causes. Running measurement processes responsibly means choosing measures that encourage desired behaviors, like timely remediation of high-impact risks, accurate reporting, and sustainable fixes that prevent regression. It also means combining measures so one number cannot distort the picture, and it means using qualitative context alongside numbers when necessary. Beginners sometimes believe metrics are objective truth, but metrics are models of reality, and a model can mislead if it is chosen poorly. This is why measurement must be tied to security intent and reviewed for whether it still drives good decisions as the system and organization evolve. In exam reasoning, a mature answer often acknowledges that metrics should reveal reality, not create a performance theater. When measurement is designed with integrity, it becomes a trusted part of governance and assurance rather than a source of conflict. Information management and measurement also connect to assurance. because assurance depends on evidence, and measurement is one way of generating ongoing evidence that security requirements remain true. If a requirement is that privileged actions must be logged and reviewed, measurement can show whether those logs exist, whether reviews are happening, and whether anomalies are detected. If a requirement is that changes must be controlled, measurement can show the rate of unapproved changes and the time to detect drift. If a requirement is that sensitive data access must be limited, measurement can show patterns of access and highlight unusual usage. This evidence supports risk decisions and helps maintain confidence after deployment, which is a major theme in ISSEP thinking. Beginners sometimes assume assurance is achieved by a one-time assessment, but measurements reveal whether security remains effective over time, which is the only kind of assurance that matters in living systems. Measurement also supports incident response by providing baselines of normal behavior, making anomalies easier to detect and interpret. Exam scenarios about uncertain security posture often point toward missing evidence, and measurement processes are a practical way to create that evidence continuously. A final piece is the organizational discipline required to run these processes consistently, because information management and measurement are not just technical systems. They are ongoing practices with ownership. Someone must define what information is needed, who owns it, how it is updated, and how conflicts are resolved when data sources disagree. Someone must define what measurements matter, how they are calculated, how they are interpreted, and how they drive decisions. Without clear ownership, information becomes stale and metrics become meaningless, and the organization drifts back into guessing. With clear ownership and routine review, information management and measurement become part of the operational heartbeat, revealing security reality the same way instruments reveal the health of an aircraft. Beginners sometimes feel that this level of discipline is advanced, but it is simply the discipline required to manage complex systems responsibly. It is also scalable, because you can start with a few high-impact measures tied to key requirements and expand as capability grows. Exam answers that emphasize ownership, routine review, and feedback loops often reflect a mature understanding because they show how measurement becomes actionable rather than decorative. When you can describe these processes as living systems that produce truth and guide improvement, you are demonstrating the mindset ISSEP expects. As we close, the main idea is that information management and measurement are the processes that turn security into something you can see, steer, and defend with evidence. Information management ensures the right security-relevant information exists, remains accurate, and can be trusted, including inventories, access records, configuration baselines, change histories, and operational logs. Measurement turns that information into signals that answer meaningful questions about whether security requirements are being met, whether controls are effective, and whether risk is trending in the right direction. When measurement is tied to requirements and risk, and when feedback loops connect metrics to decisions and improvements, the organization can detect drift early and maintain assurance over time. When measurement is shallow, noisy, or disconnected from action, it creates a false sense of security and wastes attention. The exam is likely to reward you when you choose approaches that reveal security reality rather than approaches that merely produce reports. If you remember that the goal is truth plus action, and you can explain how information management and measurement sustain security intent in real systems, you will be able to handle scenario questions with confidence and with a disciplined security engineering mindset.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit BareMetalCyber.com.